It's been 2 weeks since my best friend, emotional support animal, and pug extraordinaire, Miss Finn, suddenly and unexpectedly died. As far as how I'm coping with such a devastating and possibly traumatic loss, I don't know. But my therapist isn't concerned. Yet.
Is this not the poster child of a person who is fine?
Apparently, everything I've been going through so far is pretty textbook grief. I wouldn't know that because I've never experienced or even witnessed grief like this. Not even with the death of people. Like, losing Finn hurts so much more than when I lost my grandpa, whom I loved dearly. What's with that? Or like, why was I drowning in heartbreak and despair for a few days and then suddenly felt nothing? Although the other night was pretty bad, so apparently I'm not over that. Because grief is such a foreign concept to me, my therapist recommended I read a book called Life is Goodbye, Life is Hello by Dr. Alla Renee Bozarth. I wasn't planning to talk about it on Nice People. However, the very first thing the author talks about is how grief is taboo. And she's right. And since the taboo and marginalized realms of human experience are precisely what we talk about on Nice People, I feel it is my duty to talk about it. I won't be doing chapter summaries, but I am going to share with you what I believe are the most valuable little nuggets from it to hopefully help you understand grief a bit better, or possibly in an entirely new way, and what to do about it. The author is a priest and therapist who has not only guided countless others through all kinds of grief, but has grieved deeply herself many times. One of which she truly believed pushed her beyond the limits of what any human could endure. For 6 months, she couldn't imagine or believe that there would ever come a time where she wasn't in agonizing pain. But she trusted her therapist and the process and eventually made it through. And apparently, the book lays out exactly how to do just that. Because Dr. Bozarth is a priest, I was worried that having the same faith or some kind of faith was going to be required in order to make use of the book, or that it would be full of cheerful platitudes or lectures about how death is a lesson or God's will. And I wasn't going to have any of that. I don't want a smoothing over. I want and need acknowledgement of the very real and very raw pain I'm in. Thankfully, she put my mind at ease and won me over pretty quickly when she said how easy it is to avoid the real issue of suffering by looking immediately for ways to grow because of it. And we give ourselves false comfort when we bypass the genuine sorrow of a deep loss or disappointment and tell ourselves some cheerful platitude. We lie to ourselves about our real feelings because it is sometimes easier to live a comforting lie than to work hard at the truth. People with religious backgrounds may dismiss the pain of a situation with a shrug and a forced smile and say, "Oh well, it's God's will." The important emphasis is on truly facing the total reality of the situation, the outer circumstances, and one's full inner responses to it. Okay, good. I can get on board. So why is grief taboo? Because it's unpleasant to see someone in emotional pain. Emotional pain, unlike physical pain, is not acceptable in our culture. It makes the viewer feel responsible and guilty in some vague, discomforting way. She goes on to talk about how one of the strongest communications of grief is taboo in our culture was JFK's funeral. Days earlier, we were struck with the horror of President Kennedy's assassination. The immediate, anguished response of Jackie Kennedy, her pink suit splattered with blood, crawling over the back of the car, shrieking for help. What a striking and disconcerting contrast the funeral rite was. Subdued, in order, according to form. Even the widow's tears were subject to public protocol. Behind her thin black veil, we saw that same face, not contorted in pain, but mask-like, frozen, still. No human emotion intruded from Jackie's countenance into the controlled arena of grief according to regulation. Now, years later, I see that what was disturbing about the experience for me was that her image at the funeral, walking stiffly beside her dead husband's cortege, was being put across to the American people as an example of how we ought to behave in grief. To be fair, she may have been in shock, but this was not the general interpretation of her behavior. I remember being puzzled by British commentators' reactions during a BBC interview. One of them called her Queen Jackie because of her majesty of her public bearing.
Few will forget Jacqueline Kennedy this day. Transfigured by sorrow, she stands erect before the world's gaze and makes of her public ordeal an enduring testament of proud devotion.
Another praised her because she never let herself be seen with a tear or grimace on her face. To equate the apparent smothering of feelings with royal style seemed to me a marked instance of inhumanity. What human queen would not feel profound pain at the loss of a loved one? And why should she not show her pain and her love openly, assuring us of her humanity and our own? This book came out in the early to mid-'80s, so years before Princess Diana's death, but it reminded me of what we saw during her funeral as well. It was the same thing. No one was crying or showing any kind of emotion, and even her kids were having to put on a brave face.
William, wrestling his emotions as the cameras and paparazzi encroach on this most private moment. Harry, he's just 12 years old. He always wanted to have a normal life, and instead he has to stand here, stifling his grief.
Dr. Bozarth talks about how there's actually a spectrum of grief that we all experience on a regular basis, whether it's losing a piece of meaningful jewelry, a job or career, a marriage, a pet, a loved one, etc. What determines how painful or difficult it is to get through that grief is what the loss of that person, pet, or thing means to you. In other words, the more someone or something means to me, the more of myself I have invested, given over, or entrusted outside of myself. In being cut off from that someone or something, I am in fact cut off from that part of me that the other represented. I have lost a part of my own self. Finding my way back to the missing part of myself, reclaiming it from the person or thing now gone, is the process I have called grieving. The greater the significance of the now lost person or thing, the more one is likely to believe, I can't be happy without, or even I can't feel whole without, or I can't live without that other. All of these statements really mean I can't express a part of myself without. The part of the self that is now stifled, buried, broken, lost, may be a small part of the total person, or an essential part. This is where it started to make some sense for me. The relationship I had with Miss Finn is unlike any other that I have in my life or have had in my life. It was safe, unconditional love and unbridled joy. She brought all of that out in me. A side that's nurturing and filled with unconditional love and happiness. I can't express or feel that side of me without her. Now, That's not to say I won't have something like that again in the future, but that specific part of me, a part that I cherished deeply, died with her. It's no wonder then that a grievous loss, one that causes a person to lose access to a part of the self, can be disconcerting and distressing. One may have to discover a whole new way to keep on being what one was, or how to become something else entirely. Yeah, when I read that, it suddenly made a whole lot of sense why it's so painful and why I feel like a part of me has died. Because it did. What is needed to grieve well is to discover the nature of the losses and their meanings, and the impact of the feelings within ourselves, and then to find appropriate ways of responding. There are no shortcuts. Ultimately, the only way to get through something is to get through it. Not over, under, or around it, but all the way through it. And it has to take as long as it takes. Seems relatively straightforward. However, there are some major obstacles that can get in our way. The first of which is ourselves, or our fear of our grief. If I am prejudiced against feeling, my fear of feeling will be strengthened, and I will become the victim of my own fear. Because I am so afraid of losing control, I will stifle myself and isolate myself from others. I will not lose control. I have already lost it. Fear will be in control of me. It takes tremendous courage to surrender to our grief and actively take it on. And we're talking real courage here, not bravado. Real courage is owning up to the fact that we face a terrifying task, admitting that we are appropriately frightened, identifying sources of help and strength outside and within ourselves, and then going ahead and doing what needs to be done. Grief is a passion, something that happens to us, something to endure. People can be stricken with it, victims of it, stuck in it. Or they can meet it, get through it, and become quiet victors through the honest and courageous process of grieving. The difference between being grief-stricken and grieving is the difference between remaining a passive victim and actively making use of a situation. Grief is a passion to endure, but with the courage to grieve, you make it an action. Grieving is something you do. Another major obstacle to grieving well is societal expectations, both at home and at work. Grieving well isn't modeled to us or even tolerated. Unfortunately, many otherwise loving families have little tolerance for prolonged emotional suffering among their members. An American family will make the best of someone subjected to a month's convalescence following surgery or an acute illness, but will expect no more than a generous week for psychological recovery following an equally serious emotional injury. There is an unspoken expectation that, while physical illness can't be helped, you are responsible for your emotional health and can control it at will. This is simply not true, or it is only true to the same extent that it is true of physical health. In the adult world, men and women are given messages that emotionalism in response to deep personal grief has no place in their business or professional lives. Dedication to the company or the craft is expected to conquer any tendency towards self-indulgence in private grief. It's one thing for soulless employers to view us as just profit-generating units, but we don't do much better in our personal lives either. I wonder if culturally we had a better understanding of how to be there for someone in grief, if that would help us support each other more. I think I understand more now how to be there for someone else in grief. It's just to be there, to witness it and validate it, and gently try to give that person hope that the pain won't last forever. Dr. Bozarth also talks about grief and emotional pain as being very similar to a physical injury. The more serious a physical injury, the more time and care it takes to heal. And the same is true for emotional injuries. Shock in physical injury is the body's way of protecting us against the reality of hurt, lest the pain of the hurt be too great to bear. Just as the body can numb itself, so can the human heart. When a pain is too sudden and too great, the heart goes numb. If the injury is indeed severe, affecting a deep part of the self, the pain might be so intense that the natural protection system of the emotional self first anesthetizes the sufferer and then allows feelings to emerge only in a diffused way. The diffusion of feelings can be a way of defusing the potentially overwhelming and destructive capacities of such powerful emotions as rage and despair. It can also be a very confusing experience. This definitely happened to me. I spent a few days in so much pain. I mean, I say I couldn't bear it, but it's not like it killed me, but truly too much pain to bear. And then one day I woke up and just went numb. Since the numbing, I've been getting little controlled bursts of grief that I'm able to manage. Although, like I said, the other night was pretty awful and was hours of excruciating pain, but I did go numb again, more or less. She goes on to talk about the 4 feeling stages, being fear, guilt, rage, and sadness, and describes some of the symptoms you can experience during grief. Maybe I won't talk about the rest of it. At least not now. You guys can let me know if it's something that you're interested in. But maybe this is enough for now. Just that little bit has helped me understand a lot about what I'm going through, why it is so painful, and why I feel like a part of me has died. It's just awful. Let me know in the comments if any of this rings true for you. Once again, I want to thank you guys for being so kind and supportive while I go through this. I know this video is a little off the rails, but I don't plan on going anywhere. And I hope that I can start making some of my regular videos again. I did have a Spravato treatment a few days before Finn died, and it's actually a special kind of Spravato video because I was finally able to record one of my sessions, which I was really looking forward to showing you guys. And I still plan on showing you guys, but there's a lot of Finn in it, and I just haven't been able to bring myself to go through the footage yet. So thank you for bearing with me. I apologize for how off the rails this video is, but you guys mean a lot to me. I guess that's all for now.
Smile though your heart is aching. Smile even though it's breaking. When there are clouds in the sky, you'll get by. If you smile through your fear and sorrow, smile and maybe tomorrow you'll see the sun come shining through for you.